on the recording. I finally remembered to put the recording on at the beginning of the meeting. Usually I remember about 10 minutes in, or if not 20. So as we normally do, let's start with the four-way test. So of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Is it fair to all concerned?
All
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Your friendships.
And is it beneficial to all concerned? I've finally been able to internalize those and memorize them. Hopefully I'm doing Stavros smart justice, since he was our go-to guy for a while. As far as club business goes, I appreciate y'all's input tonight, just checking in, but also looking forward. I've been threatening you with an election for a number of weeks now. I've got the slate entered into a Google form. I'm going to send it out right this second. It's going to be an email, and it's going to be a link to a form where you can vote, and I'll have it open until next Saturday. There's an option to vote for the slate nominees, which is included in the email, or you can write in for someone if you so choose. So please do that before next Friday, but I'll send a reminder email out in between here and there just to try to get as much participation as we can. Beyond that, the other probably most pressing news for the club is that we're going to shift after this week. We're shifting to our twice a month meetings, and our first June meeting will be on June the 9th. And Charlotte's on the call, and if she wants to chime in and remind us of the speaker, I believe it's going to be a representative from Church Health, our guest who visited us last week, as well as potentially Dr. Scott Morris, but someone from Church Health to talk about how they've shifted to provide care for the population of Memphis during the pandemic. Beyond that, I don't have much in the way of pressing news for the club. Is there anybody else who has club business they need to address or to mention?
I was going to mention just something quickly. I don't know how many of y'all were here when Leslie Coleman was a member of our Rotary Club, but she and her husband had moved here from Argentina, and he had worked at the Earthquake Center. Anyway, they moved out of town because Leslie was working on her PhD at Notre Dame, and then they've since moved from there. But if y'all will just keep them in your prayers, her husband, Damian, got COVID, and he's a young, healthy person around my age, somewhere probably early 40s or late 30s. They have 2 kids, and it has just been a terrible struggle. And he has 3 chest tubes, 3 chest tubes, and he's had surgery, pretty big surgery on 1 lung. They think he's going to make a full recovery, but it was kind of touch and go, pretty scary for them. So he's still in intensive care, but doing better. But just keep them in your prayers. And that's Leslie McColeman and her husband.
Leslie Coleman, and what's her husband's name?
I can't remember his last name. I should remember, but it's Damian, D-E-M-I-A-N, Damian.
M-I-A-N. Thank you very much for that, Ellen.
Yeah, sure.
Any other club business? Seeing none, I'm going to introduce yes, Charlotte.
One other thing, the meeting on June the 9th is the 450 million campaign.
Oh, thank you, Charlotte. I appreciate it.
And I think the Church Health Center is the next meeting, whenever that is, with Carl Sletwich.
Got it. Thank you so much, Charlotte. I appreciate that clarification.
Sure.
Sorry for the mistake. I see some other folks trying to dial in. Excuse me while I click some buttons. But now I think it's time to turn it over to our speaker tonight. Charlotte, please feel free to join in, since you, I believe, coordinated with our speaker, Principal Moss, who's here on the call tonight. We really appreciate you joining us. Of course, Principal Moss is over the Bruce Elementary School on Bellevue, who we've partnered with in the past and look forward to partnering with in the future to support their students through backpack drives as well as clothing drives. And we hope that you'll tell us what you need, because we want to make sure we address those needs as best we can as a community organization. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So
I will go ahead and jump on in. So first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for just allowing me the opportunity to come speak about Bruce. I could probably talk about Bruce till you all don't want to hear about it anymore, because I just love the school and the community that I've been able to serve. So just before I just get started about Bruce, just give you a little background about me. Just wrapped up year 4 as principal at Bruce, going into year 5 at Bruce. So excited at the opportunity to continue to lead at Bruce Elementary School. And prior to me coming to Bruce, I was directly next door at Bellevue Middle School as the resident principal. So I'm very, very familiar with the Bruce community, and I've continued to serve within that community for, it's been 5 years now. But I was just so fortunate when Charlotte did contact me about speaking about what the needs are at Bruce. I think at Bruce, to give you a little backstory of Bruce, Bruce is one of the first 4 schools to integrate Memphis City Schools in 1961. So there's had such a strong historical context that we try to make sure lives out each and every day with our students, within our communities. But of course, we know that there's a lot of needs that our kids have on any given day. And we never expected that we would be experiencing a pandemic like we are now. So of course, those needs have just been magnified even more, because of course, when we return to school and the manner in which we return to school is going to be completely different for everyone. And we just know that it would have been maybe 5-6 months that our scholars would not have been in a organized schooling environment. So that's something that definitely concerns me as the leader of the school, but also it gives me an opportunity to think about what can we do differently to support our kids moving forward. So Bruce, when I first took over 4 years ago, we had about 300 kids. Moving into next school year, we're going to be close to 600 kids. And so that's actually been very intentional on my behalf. I've been very intentional about making sure that we recruit and retain our scholars so that we have the opportunity of maximizing our impact on a greater scale. And so when we first took over, we were one of the lowest performing, not necessarily lowest performing schools, but lowest enrolled schools in Shelby County Schools. And I knew that in order to keep our doors open, in order to continue the support and being able to gain additional resources, was making sure that we provided opportunities for all of our scholars to be able to excel and be able to succeed. And so that was definitely one of the missions that I had starting out at Bruce, was making sure that we got kids in the door, because I have a mission that once they're in the door, their parents and their kids, they're never going to want to leave, because we're going to make it a great environment for them. And so we have about 90% of our population are students that would identify as students of color. We have about 10% of our population that identify as English as a second language. So we actually have a lot of kids who are not necessarily live in our area, but since we have had historically, we've been known as a school, as a little hub for our English as a second language students, a lot of those families decide to pass a few other schools to send their kids to Bruce, because they are aware that of the treatment and the love that we're going to to give to our scholars on any given day. We also have about 10% of our population who do identify as special needs with some type of disability. One thing that's very unique or I love is that we do have 4 pre-K classes, 2 of which are pre-K special needs classes. And so we get scholars as young as 3 years old that have some type of disability, trying to give them that additional year of support to be able to kind of get them everything they need to be successful. And I think the most alarming kind of statistic that has come up since I've been at Bruce is that 10% of our population are homeless. And so that has been a recent occurrence in the last 2 years of me serving as principal, where we now have a partnership with Salvation Army, where we have about 60 kids every year that are temporarily displaced or homeless. And so with them being homeless, not having stable housing, there are a lot of needs that they have on any given day that sometimes we do our best to be able to provide their families with resources. But of course, on any given day, we might run out of resources. And so as far as like getting scholars the uniforms that they need so they can make sure they're not being left out, or that, ridiculed because they look different or they're dressed a little differently than everyone else because their parents just cannot afford those things. Making sure they have the supplies that they need. Again, making sure that we can provide those things for them. That's why when you all came through at the beginning of the year with the school supplies and the book bags, like that is a huge resource to us, because we want to be sure that all of our kids have the tools that they need to be successful. We know that they might have come from a home where they didn't have lights on, where they didn't have the food that they needed, where they didn't have the resources to be successful. And so every single day that they step foot in Bruce, we have to make sure that we treat them like the celebrities that we think that they are. And we make sure that we provide them with any and everything that they need to be successful. So we oftentimes try to tell parents that we just need them to get them to school every day. If you get them there, we can take it over from there. But as much as we like to do that every single day, sometimes our resources are depleted because we're trying to support and provide assistance to as many families and as many students as possible. And so because of that, our kids are dealing with a lot of trauma. At the beginning of every school year, we continuously have trainings with our staff on ACEs, on those adverse childhood experiences that our kids experience, because we know how much, if a child is hungry before they get to your class, it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to really focus on the instruction and be able to focus on the learning that we're trying to implement for them. And so we've definitely tried really hard over the course of my years to make sure that we're providing as many resources and experiences for our scholars. And so one of the things that we really pride ourselves on, prior to me coming to Bruce, as I mentioned, I was from the middle school sector. And so I prided myself in providing students with a middle school experience in elementary school. And so we have a plethora of activities that we offer our kids. And so when one comes to our school, they're like, wow, you all do a lot for your kids. And we do that because we're trying to supplement what they might not be experiencing while they're at home. And so we have a dance team, a garden team, a crafting club. We have majorettes, a drum line, cheerleaders. I actually started for Shelby County School's first ever elementary basketball league. And so we have a basketball team that we compete in the fall season and in the spring season, where about 20 plus elementary schools within the district signs up to compete in, as an opportunity to provide our kids with just alternatives for things they can do outside of the classroom. And so ultimately, we do all that because, again, we want to make sure all of our kids have those positive outlets that they can be a part of in the afternoons, during school, to kind of get their minds off of maybe some of the traumatic experience that they've had in the past. And so a lot of times when we are facilitating these activities are being facilitated by the bank of Principal Moss, as well as the bank of numerous of our staff members who are just phenomenal individuals. I tell people all the time, like, I couldn't ask for a better staff who are committed to our kids always. And so I always ask my staff at the beginning of every meeting and at the end of every email I send them, and how are the children? And if we as a school, if we as a community can't respond with that all of our students are well, then we aren't necessarily doing our job. And so what we've been really focused on over the course of years is just trying to find different non-conventional ways that we can continue to promote learning, promote fun, and promote different type of joy into our scholars. And so in the past, we've been a state of Tennessee reward school for the high achievement and the high instructional content support that we provide our scholars. So we've been a level 5 TVAS school where we have grown kids over the course of the year more than what's been expected. We've also, again, had double-digit gains in math and science instruction. But I want to say the one area that we continue to focus on as a school community has been around literacy. Really trying to find non-conventional ways to get our scholars excited about reading, learn the fundamentals of reading, and be able to provide them with the support and tools that they need to learn the fundamentals of reading. And so there's been numerous initiatives that we've launched. I've launched bedtime stories. So you might be familiar with every Tuesday during the school year, I normally read a bedtime story to my scholars, and it kind of got picked up by numerous media outlets and kind of blew up from our bedtime stories. But we also have, over this pandemic, I've been reading bedtime stories every night to my scholars, just to kind of give them a bedtime story every single day, so that, again, they're learning different things about the stories that that I'm reading about, but also trying to get them invested in just loving the idea or the concept of reading. And so I think one thing that people will learn, or if you all don't get this about me already, like, I'm very passionate about my kids and them being successful in this world. And I think currently during the pandemic, one of my biggest worries and one of the things that keeps me up at night is that we know that when our kids came to school, we took care of their needs, that we took care of, made sure they were fed 3 times. Well, during breakfast, they got a snack and they got lunch. And so now those needs are not necessarily being met. And so that's something that definitely concerns us. And so moving into this upcoming school year, some of the things that myself, my admin team, and the teachers have been trying to work on, trying to figure out what can we do to try to create a food pantry at on our campus, to make sure that we create a clothes closet, continue replenishing the clothes closet, and make sure that we have all the tools and the resources that our scholars need. And then ultimately, like, making sure that we have those school supplies that our kids need. We don't want our kids or our parents to have to worry about what they're going to sacrifice to try to provide their kids what they need. And we want them to understand that if you need it, we definitely have an open door policy where our parents will come and advocate for what their child might need. And we try our best to provide those resources for them. But again, as I can continue to, like, reiterate, sometimes those resources they just don't exist. And so we aren't given money in our budget to be able to go out and purchase clothes for our scholars. We aren't given money in our budget to be able to provide food in our food pantry for them. And so financially, we also aren't given money to try to bring in some of our reading incentives that we want to try. So one of the things that we've really been wanting to do at Bruce for the longest is bring back if you're familiar with the AR program, the Accelerated Reader Program, as an opportunity to continue to inspire the kids to read, get points for them, build that right into our school-wide culture, so that we can, again, encourage students to. But again, with resources being so strained in the past, especially this school year, our budget has been cut even more. Even though we've continued to increase enrollment, our budget was still cut this year. And so it's like, you work so hard all over the course of the years to increase your enrollment, to increase your budget, so that you can increase the resources for your scholars. Yet this year, we're in such a weird time that although we increased our enrollment by 50 kids for this upcoming school year, our budget was cut by $130,000. And so it's crazy to think that now we have to use our resource that we have for more kids, but less resources. And so these are just all things that kind of keep me up at night as I think about what can I do to best support our school. And so what we've really been working on, and one of the goals that I've had for myself over the course of the summer, is to try to solidify as many school partnerships as possible. Anyone that's interested in trying to be a new adopter for Bruce, to provide support for Bruce in any way, we are definitely here. We call ourselves the hidden gem in Midtown, because we're right behind Bellevue, and sometimes you can't necessarily see us, and we look like we might be an annex of the school, but we are back there. We are doing some phenomenal work, and I always tell people that I don't think we're going to be hidden for far too much longer, because we're really doing such great work that we're definitely making a name for themselves. And so that was just a little bit about Bruce, about some of our needs, about some of our kids, and kind of like where we are and how we've come to where we are. So again, I thank you all for just taking time just to even listen to me to talk about my school. And I would love it if anyone has any questions for me, questions about our school, I would love to answer them as well.
I do have a question. I'm curious about, you talked about your concerns for the students this summer and the return to the fall. And I know that recently the superintendent announced a panel or an organization that would be working towards the fall. Have you heard anything about what the return to school plan looks like yet? Or have they got that far?
Yes. So I actually am fortunate enough that I was selected to be on the principal focus group, to be able to provide some input on what schooling will look like. And so one of the things that's coming up of recently is thinking of pushing back the start of school to after Labor Day, to try to provide a little bit more time in between the pandemic to hopefully to see if the numbers will start decreasing by the time school is expected to start. So that's one of the biggest things that they are focusing on. And they've also been talking about, which hasn't necessarily been something that I'm interested in, not to say interested in, but I don't know. There's a lot of things that have to be worked out. But again, I know a big thing that I have experience with at my school is that when we have kids who are sick, sometimes it's very difficult to get our parents to come pick them up. And so thinking of life with COVID-19, and we have a child who gets sent to school with a temperature or is having symptoms, what does that protocol look like for us to be able to house those scholars until those parents are able to get in to pick them up? Or, what is the expectation on the school side to be able to address those needs? And so one of the things that we've been really focused on is making sure that all schools, we have a nurse that's only at our school for 1 day a week, which I think is not going to be a reality moving into this new school year, because again, we're going to have someone trained on staff every single day to be able to provide that support. And so that's some things that we've been advocating for, is making sure that we provide a nurse on staff every single day. Also thinking about hiring additional bus personnel. We do have buses that transport our scholars, and they're already saying that the buses are going to have to be socially distanced, which means that our bus is already at capacity. And so that means that either scholars are going to have to get to school an hour before school starts, which means that there's going to have to be staff members that are going to have to be there to support them and receive them, or there's going to be scholars that get to school an hour late every single day because they are on that last route. And so there's been so much conversation about eating lunch now and eating lunch in the classrooms so that we can monitor and keep students out of a school-wide kind of assembly or gathering space. And so it's definitely going to change the way that we're in school in general. And I think how we close out the school year, we definitely have been piloting some online learning. And so my school was selected to do this online pilot where all of my staff members had to host in the school year meetings with our scholars online to see the accessibility of our scholars, to see how easy it was for scholars to be able to navigate and their parents. And we learned that it was not an easy process. And so we had a lot of scholars who could not gain access. We also had a lot of scholars who their parents have four children in our building. And so our meetings were all taking place at the same time. So how do you have online learning when there's one set of equipment in the school and in the home for them all to use at the same time? And so kids had to log off of the computer to let their brother get on for 5 minutes so they could let their other sibling then log on. So I think there's something that's definitely came up in these conversations. There's so many things that I don't think we've ever thought of. You have to have a plan for every little thing and understand that, of course, our goal is to make sure that we maintain the safety of all of our kids, but there's just so much that's going to have to go into it. And so they're talking about whether we're going to start school on virtually and then try to phase into more of a hybrid approach. So they've definitely put a lot of scenarios out there that we're all just trying to still continue to meet weekly to kind of come up with what's the best game plan moving forward.
I see Charlotte has her hand up and then Pam after that, okay?
Oh, yes, Archie. I was
Yes.
interested in the AR reading. Do you already have the software for AR? And you just now need the incentives or not?
So we had AR my first year, but because we were able to utilize Title I funds in the past, we're a Title I school, and so we were able to use Title I funds to be able to purchase AR. Well, since the Title I regulations have kind of been a little bit more strenuous, and so now we're no longer allowed to use the Title I funds to purchase AR. And so since we have not been able to purchase it because we don't have the outside, so a lot of the schools in the past have had outside entities that have contributed to the funds so that we will be able to have donations to be able to say, okay, this donation is made for the Accelerator Reader Program. And because that's what the donation was made for, we're able to actually go ahead and use the funds for the purposes that we set forth. And so it's a matter of gathering all the resources monetarily to be able to get it back up and running, but that is a program that we did have. We can create the incentives. We've been very non-conventional this past year. We have lots of incentives in place for our behavior when our scholars exceed. We actually have a system where scholars get paychecks and they get paid for doing great work. And so we have incentives like they have lunch with Principal Moss. We have a pizza party, ice cream party, and no uniform pass. We get very non-conventional, and sometimes things don't have to necessarily be monetary for the things that our scholars are excited about. They're excited about wearing flip-flops to school sometimes. And so we have the incentives down packed, and sometimes being able to find the funds to be able to provide those type of programs so that our kids can just get the tools that they need to get a little bit more practice with their reading.
Right. But do you already have the books also?
Yes, so we have the books. So our books in our building, in our library, they're already marked for AR. They're part of the program. It's just a matter of having the program available for the kids.
Okay, great. One other question. How many are on your staff?
So we have 60 total staff members, and that's teachers. I probably have about 35 teaching staff, and then about 25 support staff members.
Well, and another thing, I just really want to thank you, to let you know how much we appreciate you, because I know I personally started trying to reach you in November, but on Tuesdays you have your reading night, so that was like out of the picture. So
yes.
Maybe there's a silver lining in the pandemic in that we got you to speak today, and we really appreciate everything you're doing, particularly your reading program. Do you ever have outside or celebrity readers?
Yes. So actually, yes. So actually, over the summer, so every year, I do it this year round. And so during the pandemic, I was like, I miss my baby so much that I'm going to do it every night. I don't think I really realized what that meant, that every single night I had to do it. But right. I'm very appreciative at the time because I was able to connect with my scholars every day. But we are now on summer break. And now we will be returning starting June 9th. We're going to be doing weekly bedtime stories. And so over the summer, what I normally do to kind of get the kids, sometimes I think they like to hear Principal Moss read, but sometimes they might need some extra other voices so they can kind of, maybe I'm not giving them as much enthusiasm as they like in this story. And so every summer we actually open it up for community members. So last summer we had like some of our county commissioners volunteered to do guest reading. I actually had some other principals guest read on our Bruce Elementary School page, would also open it up to even more students. So not only were students at Bruce Elementary getting it, but then those students at those other schools that the principal served at were also getting the bedtime stories as well. And so, yes, we're always open to guest readers. And so really soon I'm going to be getting ready to launch my community partner initiative with bedtime stories, where I am going to allow, different community adopters to volunteer to read bedtime stories. Because what I will say is last summer when I did do that, I think they started to like my guest readers a lot more than me. And so I had to cut them off at one point and say, okay, Principal Moss is going to come back because I don't need you to like them more than me. And because they were bringing props and costumes. And I was like, oh, wow, I've clearly been doing something wrong. So, but I absolutely have stepped my game up because of them, because I realized, okay, I have to be a little bit more animated. I have to bring them characters, make the characters come to life. And so I think that, yes, that is absolutely something that I will be getting ready to start.
Okay, we have Elvis is a member of our Rotary group. I don't think he's on the line now, but he might be a good one for you.
Awesome. Okay. So
Elvis as in Presley.
Right.
Elvis as in Presley.
I think Pan has a question.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
One, and why were you cut $130,000? I think it's outrageous. Okay. Second, do you have reset rooms? I would like to say first of all, I did a Rise to Read at Bruce last year. My husband and I both came to Bruce. So I'm just a little bit familiar, although we got kind of a late start and a sudden ending. So I think the program is helpful. Okay.
Yes.
Do you have reset rooms? But my big thing is for Micah, you know, that I'm also involved in Micah. Why was this money cut? And the fact of having a nurse one time a week. I mean, on the big picture, we need funds for this. We don't need voucher systems. We need
No,
public school.
agreed. Absolutely.
So what?
So in the past, so I will say that I'm not, Bruce isn't the only school that was cut. I think what was most disheartening was that each year they tell you that, you know, there's a side of education that students bring funds with them. And so increasing your enrollment means that you will increase the amount of funds that you are able to acquire over the course of the school year and that you'll be able to use to put right back into the kids. Unfortunately, because there's been in the past schools that have had decreased enrollments, the district did not want to decrease the personnel or decrease the amount of support that they were providing those schools. And so they allowed those schools to have exceptions to, instead of them having to excess or have a staff member leave their staff, they allowed them to give them like a year of excess. So what that meant was that now those funds that were supposed to be allocated to other schools that were gaining kids, those funds weren't necessarily going there because the district was kind of moving into their bank to kind of provide those resources to those schools so that those schools continue to run as normal. Because again, losing a teacher on staff can completely change how you do school in general, because now class size are going to increase, resources are going to be spread a little bit thinner. And so because the district had been doing this in the past for so many years, trying to cover for schools that needed that extra support, this year that money, there isn't money in the reserve to provide those resources. And so now they had to do a cut across the board for all schools to try to cover those reserves. And so because we are what we consider a larger elementary school, which we're not as large as I think some of the elementary schools are, we're kind of like one of the mid-sized ones. Mid-sized elementary schools were hurt the hardest because we gained a lot more students, but our funds were cut drastically. So if you were a smaller school with about 300 kids, if you were expected to lose funds, you might have lost about $10,000 to $20,000, which is pennies in comparison to the $130,000 that we were cut this year. And so we've just been trying to be non-conventional, figure out different ways that we can supplement that moving into this upcoming school year. And the second question, remind me of the second question? It
was about reset rooms.
Oh, yes, reset rooms. Yes.
Yeah.
So we actually have a room, we call it the turnaround room.
Okay.
And so, yes, we call it the turnaround room because the whole premise of it is you come in, scholars might need a break. They might need time to have a conversation with another adult about what's going on at home. And so we have a turnaround room that we have a staff member that their full-time job is the turnaround room. And so even when there are not scholars that are in that room, that staff member pushes in, our turnaround coordinator pushes into the classrooms to check in on those scholars who might have been in there in the past, but to just simply provide support and resources to those scholars. Our counselors work really closely with our turnaround room coordinator, because when we have a scholar that is in the turnaround room for any different reasoning, we bring our counselors in to be able to provide some counseling services for those scholars, so we can try to get to the heart or the root of exactly what the issues are with those scholars, why they needed a little time out, why they needed to reset their behavior, why they didn't need to turn around. And so again, we established a turnaround room. That was something that I brought on when I came on staff, because again, sending scholars home and suspending them is not the answer.
No,
and so if
right.
we're sending them home to environments that we're trying to prevent them from being a part of, it's not saving them in this process. So we keep them in school. And so typically when scholars need that time away from the classroom to kind of regroup, get what they need, they go to turnaround room. We have our teachers push in during their planning periods to still provide them with the instructional support that they need. And so what we've seen since I've been at Bruce, we have decreased every single year, we have decreased the amount of suspensions that we've had because of the way that we've been able to utilize the turnaround room as an intervention to be able to provide support. And so in the event that we have to call parents to come into the school, we typically we've exhausted 10 resources over the course of that week. And we're like, okay, Mom, we need you now to come on in
Yes,
so we can have a conference. And even then, it's not a suspension conversation. It's, Mom, we need you to come in so that we can all have a meeting, like we like to call it, a come to Jesus conversation with you and the child,
Yeah.
so we can figure out what is it that we aren't doing. And we always still pull on ourselves. What are we not doing to best support your child? Because they're not being successful. And so we have to sometimes tweak the way that we communicate to our kids, talk to our kids, support our kids, to make sure that we're giving them exactly what they need. And so one of the tagline, I call it tagline, but it's what we're grounded in at Bruce. And we're grounded in making sure that all of our kids feel seen, heard, and deeply known. And so we make sure that our kids feel like they can come and speak and advocate for what they need. We make sure that we listen to their needs, and we make sure that there's something that we contribute or that we do on within our school day that they see themselves in. So they feel like, okay, I feel like they are trying to get to know me and they're here for me and they have my back. And I think that's why we've been able to be so successful with increasing our enrollment every single year, where every year, I tell people when I first took over Bruce 4 years ago, there was 0 students on our waiting list for our choice transfer. And now we have over 100 kids that are on the waiting list at the end of every school year, and actually now have to turn kids away because a lot of the parents are attracted to just the activities and the resource that we try to provide our kids, because again, we just want to supplement their learning as much as possible.
Thanks. And I'm so happy to hear that. I really, what's your maximum number of students that you will arrive at and hope to?
So 750, we can go up to 750. And so we're still growing. I'm steadily increasing, trying to get over 550. So this year we're going to be looking at, we'll be right at a little bit over 600. So another thing, not necessarily a funny thing because it doesn't support us, but you have to have 550 kids to have an assistant principal for the district to provide you with the funds to fund an assistant principal. Okay. This work cannot be done with just me. And so we've had to dig into, again, some additional resources to have an assistant principal. But again, that takes that money that could be used in other ways. It takes that money out because we are providing an assistant principal position. And so that's my goal for this upcoming year, is to get 550 K-5 students, so that we can, that will free up about $100,000 that we'll be able to utilize for resources, because they do not count, although I have 80 pre-K students in my building, they do not count pre-K into those ratios. And so although I'll have 630 kids in the building, if 550 of them are not in K-5, then they will not give me an assistant principal. So again, I've also been I've been continuing to recruit and try to make sure kids know that, and parents know that, hey, we want them to come to Bruce, because again, I know that increasing the amount we have, increase the likelihood that we'll meet that 550 student mark, and increase just the resource that we can provide to put right back into our school.
Great. And how many counselors do you have?
Pan, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump to a question that came in.
Sure.
That we kind of been sitting on. Denise had a question, and then we'll go to Mike, if you don't mind. Principal Moss, how do you budget for so many of your scholars who have such a high level of daily need in an equitable way? I mean, that sounds like it must be a real challenging factor for you, considering these additional budget constraints that you have.
It's definitely challenging. And so fortunately, the district, we moved to site-based budgeting about 2 years ago, and now we're kind of fully into it. So now we receive funds based on different student demographics. And so we receive additional funds for students who are economically disadvantaged. We receive additional funds per student for students who are English as a second language, students have special needs. And so the district definitely does support us in providing a kind of a budget. It's like, okay, this is the amount of money that goes for these students that have these different demographics. And so that supports us in trying to allocate some of those funds. But ultimately, a lot of the funds, students might not fit on that list. They might be students who are not economically disadvantaged, or in the time might not be economically disadvantaged because their parents might not have disclosed that information about their needs. And we're only able to provide the resource to them when those parents share that information with us. And so I think that's been the biggest thing that my counselors, we have 2 counselors who really work so well together, and they work so closely with Shelby County Schools community services department, where we try to provide our parents with different resources as well to kind of make sure that, okay, if your lights aren't on, we can call someone to provide you with support to kind of help you get those lights back on. Or if a parent comes in and says that they're now temporarily displaced or homeless, we put them in contact with our contact at Salvation Army to get them some shelter for the time being. So we've definitely been able to try to, as parents come in and share like, hey, my child doesn't have this, we just stop what we're doing to try to provide those with those resources. So if there isn't, which most of the time when parents say they need these things, it's not a budget line item that we can go pull from to say, okay, we need to go buy this parent or buy this child this, because there isn't a budget for that. So that's where we rely on our staff, and we just, our communication amongst ourselves is so tight that we just have to, at that point, let them know like, hey, this family is now temporarily displaced or homeless. They have some needs. Like, does anyone have contacts? Does anyone like to contribute? And we kind of try to support our kids as best as possible in that way. But there isn't necessarily a budget that we can just go pull from to say, okay, these kids, we need to provide them with food before this holiday. Like, we have to just make sure that we create those resources for our kids in general.
Mike, I think you had a question.
Yeah, one is just a thank you to Principal Moss on the basketball. Are there any other after-school programs for your scholars?
Yes, so we have, so when I logged on, you might have seen that my picture was the Gentlemen's League, which is an after-school program. It's a school-based mentorship program that I established at Bruce, which ultimately the whole purpose of that is to educate, empower, and enrich our boys to lead them to a path of success. And so we have different workshops, field trips, there's tutoring component, there's a community service component. And so that's one of the things that we have about 80 boys at Bruce Elementary School that participates in that. And the program is also at Bellevue Middle School for grades 6th through 8th. And so as the boys matriculate into middle school, the program continues to support them in their years post Bruce. And so I have a goal for the Gentlemen's League that next year we're actually going to be piloting at 2 additional schools, at Seattle Elementary and at John P. Freeman K through 8. So I'm excited about continuing the impact of the Gentlemen's League organization over the course of students across Shelby County Schools. But we also have a girls equivalent mentorship program. We have our dance teams, our art clubs, crafting clubs. All these things all take place after school. And so the kids, when they get there, they have numerous opportunities of things they can sign up for and participate in. And so it kind of helps to supplement the work that we're doing in school. And I always share the story. This past February, I had the opportunity of doing a TEDx talk at Crosstown Concourse. And one of my premises of it was small ideas lead to big change. And so when we create these small things that we never thought would actually manifest into anything big, I saw how some of my scholars who were in lots of behavioral troubles prior to being a part of these activities, as soon as we put them in and we made them involved in these programs, they never got in trouble again. And so we try to have as many activities for our scholars because we're able to utilize that as a behavioral incentive as well. Like if you aren't doing what you're supposed to do in the classroom, then maybe you can't perform at the upcoming pep rally, which to the kids, that's like life-threatening to take away their ability to perform or to play in a game. And so we're always trying to find different ways that we can have kids involved in things after school.
Very good. Thank you.
No.
Principal Moss, there was a question that came in. One that's very important, we don't want to miss. If someone has a check to donate, where would you like them to send it for you and your scholars?
So if they have a check to donate, they could send it to Bruce Elementary School. So 581 South Bellevue Boulevard, Memphis, Tennessee 38104. And if anyone did want to donate, I always ask individuals that are trying to donate that to, specify how you would like the funds to be utilized. If you want them to go into our reading initiatives, if there's a letter that could accompany it that says, hey, I want this to go into our food pantry, that assists us in putting the money in the appropriate account so that the funds will be used for the exact purposes that you all intend them for. And so, yes, you can send them to Bruce, and we would be excited. We're always looking for ways that we can supplement what we're doing at Bruce.
Thank you. And again, just to make sure, Bruce Elementary School, 581 South Bellevue, 38104.
Correct.
Great. I've got that in the chat if anybody wants to collect that. And then another question that came in from Pan was the Shelby County Schools is supposed to receive $43 million in federal CARES funds. But it sounds like most of that is to go to technical items. Do you have any thoughts or commentary on that?
Yeah, so that's been, they have the resources. I think that's been the biggest thing that I've been struggling with over the course as we've gone to this online learning platform, which of course it's provided us the opportunity of getting in contact with our kids. But I just know there are so many of our kids that do not have access. And there are so many of the kind of curriculum platforms that we utilize that aren't compatible on cell phones. And so one of the curriculum that we use as an intervention and enrichment tool is iReady. iReady doesn't have the capability of being utilized on a cell phone. And so our parents want to be able to provide their kids with that additional support at home, but sometimes they don't have the resources. So I definitely do understand the need. Like, I know specifically our school is one of the schools that we definitely have a large percentage of our school that does not have laptops at home and does not have internet access. And so I do know that the district's push and the district's focus on trying to provide every scholar with a laptop and a hotspot or internet access is definitely going to be beneficial to Bruce Elementary School, because that is an area that kids do not have that. Even at the school level, every year that we receive our Title I funds, we purchase additional laptop carts so that eventually our goal is that we'll eventually have a one-to-one campus where every scholar will have their own individual laptop that they can utilize at school. But again, that comes with resources and money. And every year, if money isn't there, it's hard for us to be able to continue to provide those supports for our kids. And so I do think the technology push is definitely needed, especially for a school like Bruce, where we know that we have kids that's living in shelters. So we know that their parents don't have the internet access they need to be able to access the learning or to access the curriculum as we provide it to them.
So how do you reach these kids who are struggling in this manner?
And so what we did over this pandemic was everything that we offered online, we just created packets for the kids as well. And then I had my staff, like I said, they'll do anything to make sure we're providing support to our kids. And so we just scheduled time, even during the pandemic, where we had time where parents came up to the school, they would buzz in and we would ask them what grade they needed a packet for. And we would give them a packet. So we would give them a packet through the door so they could be able to still have access to resources. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing is we did do a lot of teaching online. So there were different things. So a lot of our parents had cell phones. And so they were able to access the videos online. But as far as accessing some of the curriculum that we utilize on Google Classroom and some of the other platforms, they just were not able to utilize that. And so we just provide them with paper and pencil resources to be able to at least get them the practice that they need. Of course, is that perfect? Is that ideal? Absolutely not. But we were just trying to find any way to still be able to make that communication and contact with the parents. And so I had my teachers, our staff, they called every child in their homerooms. And basically we did like a survey to say, okay, like, do you have access to internet? Do you have a computer at home? What resources have you been accessing? Because once we were able to get that data from those conversations, we were able to kind of rethink how we were going to be able to provide those resources. And so that was where we were like, okay, we have to start providing some more paper and pencil resources because a lot of our parents don't have access.
Great. So how do we clone you?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because my staff, I feel like I have little clones of me throughout my staff. So, you know, I definitely love, like, you know, when this pandemic and when life resumes as normal You know, if you all have never been to Bruce, I always invite people to come on out to Bruce, see us in action. You'll feel the love and the joy when you come through the hallways. Our kids just love being there. And again, I'm really big on just bringing fun and joy back to school. So we are definitely going to push the instruction. We're going to push the rigor. We're going to push the reading and the math and everything else that kids need to have. But we're going to make it fun where kids don't realize that they're learning in the process.
Thank you very much, Principal Moss. We really appreciate you coming in tonight. This has been very, very informative and exciting to hear about all the work you've been doing. That's just having such a huge impact in the community. Going forward, I've collected some of the information you shared with us and put it into the chat. If anybody wants it there, I'll also try to make sure it's available if anybody wants it emailed to them directly. I wish we could have you to our normal location. We like to give out brownies. We'll invite you. We'll just offer a standing invitation for when we do reconvene for you to come by, and hopefully we can, return to your campus as well to bring contributions and just our bodies and ourselves to try to help as we can with your students. Beyond that, I think I'm just going to go ahead and bring the meeting to a close. If it's all right, I do want to mention that we're happy to see Carl floating in and out of the background. I know he's been under the weather of late. We're real happy that he's back home and hopefully feeling better. And thank you, Ellen, for the update on Damien. I saw that you put that in the chat, that he's on the mend still, and he's continuing to recover from COVID. Beyond that, if you have not already, do please vote. I've again sent those emails out with the link attached, and the deadline again is on Friday. If you have any additional news you want to share, please feel free to send it to me and we can pass it along to Harry, or you can send it to Harry directly. Principal Moss has just put in his contact information in the chat. I'll have that available so we can follow up with him as necessary. So any other pressing club business anybody wants to bring up before we sign off?
One other thing,
Yes.
invite all of your friends to that June 9th meeting with Carl Sletwich, because this involves all of us in the community that have electricity. If you don't have electricity, I'm not talking to you. But the rest of us, we need to be there.
That's the MLGW versus TVA kind of discussion, right?
Right, exactly.
I have something to add. It's not really club business, but my podcast, Friends on Hand, went live last week.
Great.
You can find it on iTunes and Spotify and everything, but we are really just talking about the fine art of friendship. And I do want to talk to Barry, Mike, and her friend, but y'all go check it out. It's friendsonhand.com.
All one word, friendsonhand.com.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank
congrats, Nancy. Thank you. Any other news? All right. Well, seeing none. Again, such a pleasure to have you all. And again, thank you, Principal Moss, for coming in.
Thanks, Archie.
Great.
Great job. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, y'all have a great evening and good rest of the week. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good meeting, everybody.
Good to see y'all.
That's great.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Shirley.